Well, I've said that the more difficult part of the essay is figuring out just why he thinks that mortality is a burden. But in a way, it's really quite simple, I suppose. The fancy way of putting it, or the basis for the claim, the fancy way of putting that basis for the claim, is what he says on the first page when he says our opening observation here is that organisms are entities whose being is their own doing. That is to say, that they exist only in virtue of what they do. That I think makes a lot of sense, especially if you contrast it with, as he does later, with the manner of being of an organism like ourselves, and the manner of being of what he calls an ordinary physical thing. What does he say? A proton, a molecule, a stone, a planet. Those things just sort of sit there. Or maybe they're not always sitting there, but they just are. And they will continue to be unless some other force comes and destroys them. Right? So it may be that all physical things, unless we get down to a certain level, are perishable. But they're not perishable in the way that an organism is perishable. They don't have to do anything to continue to be, whereas the organism has to keep on working, has to be active in a certain way in order to continue its existence. And that's why the key term here, and really the translation into more ordinary terms of the philosophical expression that organisms are entities whose being is their own doing, is metabolism, as he says in the bottom of page 34. What we have couched so far in the abstract terms of being and doing, the language of ontology, can now be called by its familiar name, metabolism. It is that organisms, in order to continue to be what they are, must constantly be at a certain peculiar or particular active state, and that is metabolizing. We must constantly, in order to continue to be, transform some substances from our environment into those that we need to continue to live, and that this process is perpetual. It's a perpetual doing, as he says, metabolism. What he says, she says, what it denotes, metabolism, is this: to exist by way of exchanging matter with the environment, transiently incorporate it, use it, excrete it again. Right? This is the condition of life. I mean, all life needs, the substances that are needed to the intake, water, oxygen, many other things, nutrition. And there's the outflow. We create waste. All living things create waste of some sort. I mean, we're lucky that with plants it's oxygen, right? But that's their waste. They need the carbon dioxide. We need the oxygen. So let's hope that continues. But that's really the matter. I mean, it's all very delicate, right? That is the reality of metabolizing is that you can never be sure that the conditions will be right. That is, it is not completely up to you that your environment provides you with what you need to metabolize. And I think it's also true that you are never sure that you won't drown in your own waste, which is in a certain way what's happening now environmentally. Is that we're at least our technology, we're creating way too much carbon dioxide, which is warming the planet. It's an obvious truth, right? But the real thing is that the real crux of the matter is that this process of metabolizing, which is absolutely necessary for us to continue to be what we are, is a really fragile, delicate, and not guaranteed process. Right? And this is the basis for his claim, which he makes in several places in different ways, that life carries death within itself. That the condition for us being in the way that we are, organisms, is that there's the constant possibility of us not being, that something could go wrong in that metabolizing process, and eventually will, right? But that's the possibility that's there every moment. So organic life has a certain very unique character that separates it off from all non-organic being. It says the second page of the second or third page. Well, as he says here, the non-being, lies always in wait and must be averted ever anew. Life, in other words, carries death within itself. Yet, if it is true that with metabolizing existence, not being made its appearance in the world as an alternative embodied in the existence itself, it is equally true that thereby to be first assumes an emphatic sense. That's a difficult sentence. It is equally true that thereby to be first assumes an emphatic sense, intrinsically qualified by the threat of its negative. It must affirm itself, and existence affirmed is existence as a concern. It's another important element to the burden, that organic life must constantly affirm itself, that it must constantly assert its being in order to continue to be. Again, contrast that with a inanimate object, which does not need to affirm itself in any way in order to continue to be. It just is. It doesn't have to do anything to be. We constantly have to do something. We constantly have to assert ourselves as beings. And again, this is true of every organic being, not just us, but everything that metabolizes. Being has become a task rather than a given state, a possibility ever to be realized anew, in opposition to its ever-present contrary, not being, which inevitably will engulf it in the end. So this constant self-affirmation on the part of the organism can be thought of equally, truly, I guess, as a denial of death, or a deferring of death, a saying no to death. That is every moment of the organism's existence is a kind of a saying yes to itself, a self-affirmation. But it's also a denial of death, a pushing off of death, a saying no to death. Because death, that's what we're doing in a certain way, is constantly doing those things which prevent us from not existing. So, this leads him to some very interesting ideas about the significance, looked at holistically in terms of the universe, the significance of the emergence of organic life as something totally new. And one of the things that he points out is that it's only organic life that has needs. Non-organic objects do not have needs. They're not needy the way that we are. And that's a big deal, right? Ontologically, in terms of the kind of beings that exist in the universe. It's also true, as he says here at the top of the next page, value. As needy creatures, we experience value. In the sense that some things have value to us, like oxygen, food, shelter, a healthy body. That this makes us entirely different sort of creatures. And again, we're not just talking about human beings here. So what does the burden really consist in? I would say that the need to constantly be active in a certain way in order to continue to be what you are. Where death is a possibility at every moment because it's built into the process, in the sense that the process could go wrong at any moment. Process of metabolizing. And that's what called death.